Chapter 8 The Goldfish Sacrifice. With no fish for dinner, Halvor served toast and marmalade, which Boom and Myrtle ate as fast as they could. He left for his Sons of the Vikings meeting at 7. Once he had disappeared down the dark street, Myrtle grabbed a book from the living room coffee table and rushed back upstairs. "It's one of Halvor's Viking books," she told Boom as he followed. Boom knew the book well, a poorly bound manuscript with shaggy edges and well-worn pages. The facts might be questionable, but it's the only one that has a section on mermaids. Myrtle began to read while the baby took another nap. "It says here that mermaids have no tongues," she told Boom as her fingers flew across the page. "They can't talk, they only sing. It says that mermen sometimes eat their young. Oh, that must be why the baby doesn't look like you." "Eat their young? Let me see that." Boom reached for the book, knocking a lamp over in the process. The baby woke up and began to cry, but it was no ordinary cry. The cry filled the room like a whistle, darting between the sheets, boomeranging off the corners, and shooting down the tunnels that led to Boom's Boom's eardrums. When it had possessed every possible space in the bedroom, the cry overflowed into the rest of the house. "Hello?" Mr. Broom called from the attic. "Oh, no," Boom moaned. He ran up the narrow stairway that led to the third floor. "What's that odd noise?" Mr. Broom asked. Boom could see only one side of his father's face through the crack in the attic door. Mr. Broom had grown a long beard, and the eye that peered out was wild with panic. "Such a strange noise. It sounds like a dangerous sort of wind." It's just a new tea kettle," Boom lied. "Not the wind?" "Not the wind." "Not another twister?" "Not another twister." Mr. Broom nodded, then shut the door. Boom ran back down the stairs. "I think it's hungry," Myrtle hollered over the ear-splitting shriek. She shook the rye crisp box, but only crumbs fell out. Boom stuck his fingers into his ears, but that didn't help. The sound managed to seep through his cells. It was the most annoying sound in the world, worse than a car alarm, worse than Principal Prune-Wallop droning through her megaphone, even worse than Myrtle's know-it-all voice. If an earwig had crawled into Boom's ear and sung 99 bottles of beer on the wall, it would have been less annoying than the merbaby's cry. Myrtle hurriedly turned the page in Halvor's book. Then she shrugged and shook her head. "It doesn't say anything about what merbabies eat." "Babies drink milk," Boom yelled. The shrieking continued as they rushed downstairs. The sound oozed its way through the single-pane windows of the tiny house. While Myrtle held the baby, trying to calm it, Boom poured milk into a plastic water bottle. Then he squirted the milk into the creature's tongueless mouth. The baby quieted, but only long enough to spit the milk onto Boom's face. "Hey!" Boom complained, pointing his finger. "Bad baby!" "Did you warm it?" Myrtle asked. "Babies like warm milk." She had wrapped the creature in one of her doll blankets. The seaweed ponytail stuck straight up. The merbaby looked like a troll, an angry troll. Boom put a saucepan on the stove and began to heat the milk. He knew how to do this because Mrs. Broom had taught him how to make hot chocolate. He wiped milk from his eyebrows and wondered if parents spanked their children. "Shh!" Myrtle urged as Boom stirred. The baby cried even louder. One of the dandelion jars shattered from the sound wave's impact. "The milk is almost ready," but Boom had turned the burner on too high and the scent of scorched milk rose from the stove. "Oh, that's just great," Myrtle complained. "If you're so smart, then why don't you do it?" he asked defensively. He turned off the burner, grabbed Halvor's oven mitts, and dumped the pan into the sink. The last of the milk lay curdled on the bottom, charcoal black. The baby started to shriek again, and a full marmalade jar exploded on the pantry shelf. "Do we have any more rye bread?" Myrtle cried. There was no bread in the pantry, and Halvor had already fed the leftover heels to the squirrels. Boom scraped a spoonful of marmalade off the shelf, careful to make certain it contained no bits of glass. He poked the spoon into the baby's open mouth. Like the milk, the marmalade shot out between the sharp teeth. This time Boom ducked. The orange blob landed with a splat on the wall, but the creature didn't start shrieking again. Instead, it pointed at the kitchen window where Hurley Mump was pressing his face. Myrtle gasped and turned her back to the window. Someone started pounding on the kitchen door. Myrtle pulled the edges of the doll blanket around the baby and ran upstairs. "Go away!" Boom yelled at Hurley, who scowled menacingly. Someone pounded at the kitchen door again. "What's going on over here?" Mr. Mump asked when Boom opened the door. He kept his blonde hair shaved close to his scalp, just like Hurley did. "What's that terrible noise that's been coming from your house?" Hurley appeared at his father's side. His eyes narrowed. He smirked in the way he always smirked at Boom, and "I'm so much richer than you" smirk, and "I'm the KBAW champion" smirk. But had he seen the baby? "Tea kettle," Boom said. "We got a new tea kettle." "Tea kettle, you say?" Mr. Mump weighed about 300 pounds. Barbecue sauce glistened around his lips. "That tea kettle disturbed our dinner. I suggest you get rid of it, or I shall call the police." Excuse me. "Yes, sir," Boom said, faking a smile as he shut the door. Mr. Mump always acted like he owned the neighborhood. From the bedroom window, Boom and Myrtle watched Mr. Mump and Hurley cross the street. "I think Hurley saw," Boom said. The baby's shriek had weakened to a low moan. Myrtle looked at it worriedly. "We've got to feed it something," she fretted. "If it won't eat marmalade, what can we give it?" "I don't know." Boom was still picturing Hurley's smirk. "You told me that you'd take care of it." Trying to hide a merbaby was possibly the worst decision he had ever made. Worse than trying to outrun Mr. Jorgensen. For a fat guy, that man could move surprisingly fast. "Please, Boom, I've got to eat it or we'll die." Suddenly, the baby was moaning and reached out both hands toward Myrtle's desk, where, along with a can of pencils and a stapler, sat the goldfish bowl. Oh, of course, Boom realized. The creature came from the ocean, so it would eat food from the ocean. Why didn't I think of that before? It wants fish food. He picked up the cylinder of Supergrow fish food from beside the goldfish bowl and sprinkled some of it into his hand, offering the flakes to the baby. But the baby ignored the flakes and continued to reach out. "Fish food," Boom complained. "Fish food," Boom explained, offering the fish flakes again. The baby shook its head and started with that mind-numbing, bowel-loosening shriek. If the shriek disturbed Mr. Mump's barbecue feast again, they'd be in big trouble. Mr. Mump would call the police, and the police would come and want to speak with Mr. Boom. They'd discover the merbaby for sure. They might also discover that Mr. Boom had been ignoring his children, and they'd take Myrtle and Boom away to a foster home, and they'd put Mr. Boom in a mental institution. And what if they discovered Halvor's Viking weapons collection in the garage? Those things had to be illegal. Boom took a long look at the fishbowl. Ted, the goldfish, swam around the pink castle the way he always did. Boom reached his hand into the bowl. He had to make the shrieking stop. "Not Ted!" Myrtle cried. Boom pinched Ted's tail between his thumb and middle finger and flung the surprised goldfish through the air right into the baby's eager, open mouth. The ferocious teeth snapped shut and the blue-green tail wiggled with delight. The shrieking stopped. Boom felt slightly nauseated by what he'd done. "Ted?" Myrtle whimpered. The baby burped and immediately fell asleep. Myrtle stared at the empty fishbowl where Ted had been swimming circles for 2 years. Colored pebbles floated around, stirred up from Boom's hand. "Poor Ted," she sighed and laid the baby on the comforter. Its little green chest rose and fell with every raspy breath. "I didn't know what else to do," Boom explained, feeling really bad, regardless of necessity. Myrtle nodded. "He gave his life for a good cause. I'm going to make a tombstone for him and write that on it." She picked up her magnifying glass and began to inspect the merbaby's tail. "There are really strange markings on some of the scales. They kind of look like little drawings. What do you think?" Boom looked through the lens, but he didn't see any drawings. Myrtle always saw strange things with that lens. "I don't know what to think anymore." He tried to shake the image of Ted being sliced by those teeth. Boom pulled back his covers and climbed into bed with his clothes on. He needed the extra layers since the room was so cold. When would they have enough money to turn on the heat? If March turned any colder, he might have to start sleeping in the kitchen. All of the day's disappointments and all of the day's excitements had exhausted him. Myrtle turned off the light and lay down next to what was supposed to have been their evening meal. "I'm so glad you found it," she whispered. "I always thought they weren't real." Boom nodded, too tired to speak. Usually when he drifted off to sleep, he secretly listened for the sound of his mother's heels coming up the walkway. But tonight, as he closed his eyes, he drifted along with the baby's sea-soaked breaths. End of chapter 8.